Sweet. Welcome everybody. This is How to Choose Foods to Nourish Your Trauma Recovery. My name is Lisa Danylchuk. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a longtime yoga teacher. And this is my dear friend, Sarah Schutzburger. And we'll talk about her experience in a moment. And maybe we'll even talk about how we met. We are recording this. So if there's any tech stuff, I mean, we've all been living in a tech world for like a year now. So if there's any tech snafus, like if I get bounced off or Sarah gets bounced off, we're all just going to take a deep breath and come back. Same thing with the recording. If you have any issues on your end, try to just roll with it. Know that we'll record this material, know that we will get it to you, whatever it takes, all right? With the minimal amount of stress, because as we'll talk about today, we want to kind of minimize that, especially that toxic stress, right? We can be excited and all that, but we want to keep our gut healthy. So it's nice to meet you. I know some of you are new to both of us. I'll introduce myself a little more in a second, but I know many of you know me quite well. So again, this is my dear friend, Sarah. We actually met here in California, but we crossed paths when we were both at Harvard. So we feel like we probably were standing in line, I don't know, at a juice bar or going for a run along the Charles and just had these moments of passing each other there. So she is a registered dietitian. She's board certified in oncology nutrition, and she's the owner of RD Pharmacy, and she loves to garden and she loves to cook, and food is one of her biggest passions. So thank you, Sarah, for being here today. And I'm really excited to pass the mic over to you in a moment. So phonetically, in case you guys don't know how to say my last name, it's a tough one. Danylchuk. Means son of Daniel in Ukrainian, so it's pretty basic over there, but you know, here in the States and around the world, people get a little confused with it. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in California. I work primarily with people recovering from all kinds of trauma in private practice. I'm also an experienced registered yoga teacher. I've taught yoga trainings for YogaWorks and lots of training for other studios and organizations who are implementing trauma-informed practices. I'm also an author. I've written a couple books. I'll be giving one away at the end if you stick around. And I also founded the Center for Yoga and Trauma Recovery. So integrating those two worlds and offering a whole body, whole being, somatic, attachment-informed, trauma-informed pathway to healing. So I'm super passionate about that, talk about it all the time. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on food, something that's not so much something I'm interested in, but I haven't done the same level of training that Sarah has. So this is what's on our agenda. I'll start with a basic framework for understanding the impact of trauma, just really simple. And then Sarah's going to dive into how trauma and the gut are interconnected. Okay, so all those back and forth relationships. And then we'll wrap up with how food can support your healing and recovery. And I'll offer just a few yoga tips as well right before we wrap up. All right. So since we even have the word trauma in the title of this, some of you have been on a lot of trainings with me, and you know, I like to encourage all of us to ground ourselves and orient ourselves to something positive. You know, when we're in the face of trauma and, you know, we've had the year that we've had last year, it's really easy to get caught up in the stress and the challenge and the problems. And one of the most helpful things to do if you are feeling overwhelmed at any point in time is to ground yourself in the present moment, find some kind of resource that's going to support you. So take care of yourself, even throughout this training, right? Get comfortable if you need a pillow, if you need your water, whatever it is. And then take a moment, and we can all just do this now. A lot of times people say put both feet on the floor. You might not, but just take a moment to actually like feel your body in this moment, in this space. That might mean pressing your hands on the desk, giving a little namaste, pressing your feet into the floor, leaning a little back in your chair, but just getting out of that sort of mental projection mode and actually sort of feeling into your body. So you can do that as many times as you wish. And I love to do it with a breath. Breathing is so good. So you can do that to reset at any point in time. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is just focus in on this. I know there's so many distractions with technology, but if you can make it big on your screen, you can silence your phone, you can close out some tabs. I'd encourage you to do that. Whenever I find myself multitasking, inevitably I end up going, wait, what was that? I missed that. Now I got to go back. And so I'm really practicing doing things fully and well rather than scattering my attention around. So I encourage you to do the same. And this guiding question when we're talking about resourcing ourselves can always come back to, what do I need right now, right? Do I need to look away from the screen for a second just to reset my eyes? Do I need to, take notes? Do I need water or rub my own shoulders or, to laugh? Side note, I've been just having Siri tell me jokes throughout the day. I'll just go, hey, Siri, tell me a joke. I won't say it loud because my phone will go off and then she'll tell a joke and it's really funny. All right, so that's an aside. So a few of you have seen this before. One model of the impact of trauma that I like to share because I think it brings together a lot of different models and it's pretty intuitive. And this graphic has color in it, which helps, is the Cascade model of defense. So I'm just going to go through this briefly. I know it's like scientific and might feel kind of heady, but I think it's really intuitive when we look at what happens when something stressful or something traumatic happens. Keep in mind, when something traumatic happens, our nervous system is trying to protect us and trying to get us to safety, right? Remember, our nervous system is our brain and goes all through our body, right? Nerves all throughout our body, all through our gut, all through our arms and legs, connected to everything. So if something stressful or traumatic happens, we're going to get a surge of protection, whatever that means. And usually, if you follow this graphic here, we've got the red zone where there's activation, right? There's like maybe a soft freeze at first just to assess what's going on. And that's usually a little bit of a parasympathetic response, but we don't need to get too far into that. But then we get this sympathetic activation in our nervous systems. You've heard fight or flight before, right? It's like you're either going to push against what's happening and make something happen or fight against an intruder, or you're going to run and get away. So this really characterizes a lot of our responses to stress. Now, if there's an acute, like one specific thing that's happening and you're trying to run or you're trying to fight and those things aren't working, well, your body's still trying to protect you, right? So it might get to the point of fright where it's feeling like this isn't working, right? I'm running, or I tried running, that didn't work. I tried fighting, that's not working. And now I'm just terrified and terror. That's when we switch to a deactivating, a very heavy parasympathetic response. And I know it can get a little confusing because there's different sort of aspects of parasympathetic responses, but this is the one that's starting to shut down your system. So at that point, you see it, the line drops quickly from flagging, like losing energy, getting this deactivation going, to faint or collapse. And this is where people pass out when something stressful happens, where there's a really hard freeze response, where people say, why didn't I do anything? It's like, well, your body might have decided that that wasn't the best course of action, right? So all this to say, when something traumatic happens, your body, your nervous system are trying to protect you. It's going to activate. If that doesn't work, it's going to deactivate. Sometimes this happens within seconds. Sometimes this happens over a longer period of time. It's always trying to find safety. Your body's always trying to find its way to safety. And throughout these progressions, if you look at the red side, fight or flight, your digestion is, it might just evacuate everything so you can run, right? It might really speed up. And on the other blue side, it might really slow down. So the ways that we're feeling threatened or the ways that we're feeling not safe can directly impact our digestion and our entire state in our body, right? So Sarah is going to talk a little more specifically about how we can kind of nourish our gut. And then I'll, like I said, wrap up with a few yoga postures that can kind of respond to this pattern, this biological wiring that we all share. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah, and you can start talking about the gut-brain connection.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. I'm so excited to join you all today to talk about one of my favorite topics, food. Registered dietitian, food kind of goes hand in hand. But today, I don't want to just talk about any food. I really want to hone in on foods that we can indulge on that help heal the mind, body, and even the environment. The connection between the foods we eat and mental health is an increasingly important and heavily discussed topic, but integrating nutrition into a trauma recovery plan still isn't mainstream.
Yeah.
And I truly hope that this eventually changes, Lisa. I really do.
We're doing it right now.
I know. So before we jump in,
webinar.
Yeah, right. So before we jump in head first, I'd like to ask you all a few questions to get our conversation started. Have you ever felt butterflies in your stomach? Do certain situations make you feel nauseous, like public speaking? And have you heard of or ever had a gut-wrenching experience? Well, these expressions are all well known for a reason. Aside from our emotional self, the gastrointestinal tract is also sensitive to emotion. Anger, anxiety, sadness, love, joy, all of these feelings and many others can trigger different feelings in the gut, and vice versa. The health of our gut can also have an effect on our mood. So today, like Lisa said, I want to explore these connections with you. But to do that, let's first take a closer look at the gut, and then we'll have a little deeper look at the systemic effects that this has on emotion, inflammation, and overall well-being. And then we'll get to the fun part with food.
Then we'll get to
So Lisa, thank you so much for driving. If you can head on over to the next slide.
There we go.
So the brain and the gut have a lively, very lively, ongoing dialogue through the gut-brain axis. And I'm going to get a little winded here telling you a little bit about this connection. So put your seatbelts on and we'll take it slow. The gut produces 75% of the body's neurotransmitters. Now, neurotransmitters are basically chemical messengers that help these nerves speak to one another. It also has 95% of the body's serotonin, has more neurons than the spinal cord or peripheral nervous system, contains 70 to 80% of the immune system, which we'll also get to in here in a little bit, contains 10 times more cells than the rest of the body combined, and houses a microbiome genome 100 times larger than the human genome, with 100 trillion, I'll say that again, 100 trillion bacteria of 500 plus different species. But wait, that's not all. And Lisa, you want to jump to the next slide? The digestive system also has its own nervous system, which is called the enteric nervous system. And we might know this, and it's often referred to as the body's second brain. And then not to mention that our vagus nerve runs directly from the brain to the gut.
Mm-hmm.
And this system receives inputs and then provides outputs to and from the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system that Lisa just went through. Mm-hmm. And it's also one of the many reasons that you answered yes to the questions that we talked about earlier. So now there is a part of the gut that we skimmed over, the microbiome. So these 100 trillion bacteria are all living and working in your gut. And science is just now truly becoming to understand what role this actually plays. These microscopic critters influence our immune system, help us digest and absorb nutrients, and can even alter our mental status through their communication via the vagus nerve and the neurotransmitter release that we talked about. So what is a healthy microbiome? Well, a healthy microbiome is a diverse microbiome where we want to see a rich community of varied species. Remember, there's about 500 different ones that we talked about earlier. So shifts in this composition is when we start to see the physical manifestations, and we now know that independently and mutually, diet, stress, and mood can substantially influence which gut microbiomes thrive and which ones die off. All right, so what does that actually look like? And Lisa, if we want to go to the next slide, we'll kind of start to go over this interconnected chain reaction. And I'll go through it at first, and then we'll start to break it down one by one. So top down, think brain to gut, our emotions trigger an immune response, which includes inflammation. Then the hormones released in this response can alter our gut microbiome, which is called dysbiosis. With dysbiosis, our gut permeability, or the strength of our gut, is compromised. And then this can cause something called leaky gut. And by definition, leaky gut is just that. It leaks. And as a result of this leaky gut and the permeability of it, the gut now allows bacteria from the foods that we're eating or other foreign substances to seep into circulation and produces an inflammatory response. See, now we're going to work our way back up in this circle. So then these physiological and hormone changes can ultimately further dysregulate our key stress response system by working their way back up through the cycle and including their effects on our immune, endocrine, and autonomic nervous systems, thereby fueling the chronicity of stress and trauma. So if we look a little bit to the left here, also inserted into the cycle are our diet, I know, and you just turn your head a little bit, lifestyle, and behavioral choices. Well, poor diet, excessive alcohol consumption, environmental chemicals, lack of sleep can all damage the good bacteria, which we now know when this happens, it causes dysbiosis. This then increases the invasion of bad bacteria and the loss of cell integrity, which we know is leaky gut, which then can lead to inflammation, compromised immune system. Many of us can even experience some food allergies or sensitivities to this, impaired digestion and absorption, compromised elimination, irritable bowel syndrome, and then eventually total body imbalance. And the cycle keeps going. So these negative changes in the GI system, such as the irritable bowel syndrome or GERD, otherwise known as reflux, and some other gut-related conditions, can then feed back on the brain, creating a vicious cycle and alter the way that we eat, sleep, and feel on an emotional level. The cycle starts all over again. And a simple example, I mean, if you think of a time where your stomach's kind of gurgling and the only thing you can think of is where's the closest restroom, you're not really focused on the present and now with what you're doing. And so this cycle continues to go. But I also do want to point out that dysbiosis itself can increase gut permeability, and it may also influence healthy behaviors like diet and promote the consumption of highly palatable processed foods. So think about it. What are highly palatable foods? Well, they're also referred to as comfort foods, right? So when we're in imbalance, we tend to go for those as well. So given this strong mind, body, brain, gut connection, it should come as no surprise that diet and mind, body tools such as meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, and yoga have all been shown to help improve GI symptoms, which in turn can then improve mood and decrease stress. They decrease the body's stress response by dampening the sympathetic nervous system, enhancing the parasympathetic response, and then decreasing inflammation. So Lisa talked a little bit earlier about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, but we really haven't dived into inflammation. So let's look a little bit at inflammation.
Can I say something about this graphic before we move?
Yeah.
It kind of looks depressing, right? Because, and which adds to the cycle. Depression, trauma, and stress can lead to this autonomic nervous system response, impacts the immune and endocrine system, leads to dysbiosis, leads to leaky gut causes more stress, more dysbiosis, more leaky gut. And so it just stands out to me that the box on its side, lifestyle and behavioral changes, is like, I mean, require medical supports and attention, especially at certain severities, but it's like the way to intercept the cycle, right? It seems like, where's the hope? I'm always looking for the hope. I'm always looking for the solution. And I'm like, oh, okay, there it is. if we're really taking care of it, if we're not taking care of ourselves or mindful of our choices, that could just make this whole cycle worse and worse. But if we are, it offers some opportunity for resolution or, a pathway towards healing.
I mean, Lisa, you hit the nail on the head here, right? So if we can break any number one of these parts of the cycle, we can change the outcome of it. And I mean, as a dietitian today, I'm really going to focus a little bit on the foods, but I mean, everything here is connected, just like our body is connected, right? What's the childhood rhyme that we have, right? So the knee bone's connected to the shin bone's connected to, right? So we learn these even as, but it goes deeper than that. And this figure here, I think, really does capture how interconnected everything is, from mind to body, from gut to brain, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So I guess if you want to take it possibly to the next slide, we'll dive in a little bit deeper, breaking this apart and finding that hope that you just talked about. And we'll do so by talking a little bit about inflammation first, if that's okay here. So what is inflammation, and why is inflammation part of the immune system? Well, your immune system is activated when your body identifies anything foreign entering it. So think about if we're eating a food that has a bad bacteria on it, right? Or there's a virus, not that there's a pandemic going on or anything, right? It's an invading substance, or even plant pollen. If you have seasonal allergies, right, you start to sneeze. But this is part of a process called inflammation. And it's more of an acute inflammatory response. So acute inflammation is part of your body's normal immune response to infection. And it's kind of characterized by local heat, redness, pain, and swelling. And all of this is done to protect your health. So let's take this as an example. I'm pretty sure everybody here has possibly had a paper cut in their life. What do you experience when that happens? Ouch, pain, right? Then you might notice some swelling or redness around your finger or around the cut. And this is all normal. It's even healthy because it's your body's first line of defense against these invading pathogens that could have been on the paper. Well, inflammation can also be systemic. It can also be chronic and low grade, which is damaging to your health and well-being. And this chronic inflammation has also been linked to poor diet, because these same foods that induce chronic inflammation are also generally considered bad for our health, including sugar-sweetened beverages, processed carbohydrates, red and processed meats. And our body looks at these as foreign invaders. And many of those that I just gave examples of are also those comfort foods. Yeah. And so we'll get a little bit more into that here shortly, but I do want to point out that many lifestyle and chronic diseases, including cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, depression, Alzheimer's disease, they have all been linked to inflammation. And so Lisa, if you want to jump over to the next slide, we can put all of this together through food and healing our brain. But while food alone can't heal someone from trauma, it can play an important role. And to be honest, we are still learning just how this all works together. But I do know one thing is clear. A healthy gut does go hand in hand with a healthy brain. So let's feed our brain with some foods. Anyone ever hear the saying, you are what you eat? Well, it's a well-known phrase for good reason. The gastrointestinal tract and the foods we put in it impacts the health of our bodies and our mind. But following a healthy diet is sometimes easier said than done. When we experience stress or trauma, we tend to reach for those comfort foods. Many of these processed foods that are the high in sugar foods lower our stress levels of those hormones that are released while we're undergoing this. And they also immediately increase the level of dopamine and serotonin and increase our endorphins. And then poof, we start to feel better. It's an almost instant gratifying experience. Now, stress and trauma not only influence our food choices, but they can also alter our metabolic response to food. And after a while, these feel-good feelings get reversed with those foods, and we start to see this negative impact of the Western style diet. Now, what is Western style diet? So this Western style diet that I'm referring to consists of excessive consumption of processed foods, animal protein, saturated fat, and refined sugars, which starkly contrasts with the fiber-rich plant-based diet that we constantly hear and read about. But why does this matter? Well, going back to you are what you eat, because this way of eating fosters a distinct gut microbiota with low diversity and greater gut leakiness, which then contributes to inflammation and the negative feedback cycle we just talked about earlier. But I'm not saying never pick up a bag of Cheetos or enjoy a hamburger and French fries, but these should not be the core of our everyday eating habits. And I'm also not one to really focus on what we shouldn't have, but rather what we should include. So let's get to the good part here. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the research and then hone in on some of the specific foods and nutrients to get our enteric, nervous system, and gastric juices flowing.
Yes.
So we're first going to take a little look at the Mediterranean diet. And this style of eating blends the basics of plant-based eating with some of the traditional flavors found around the Mediterranean. This diet has also been studied and referenced for years and years and years about its benefits for heart health, cancer prevention, and now people are really looking at it for its anti-inflammatory effects. Again, breaking that cycle if we're eating foods that have this anti-inflammatory effect. So although multiple components of the Mediterranean diet have a synergistic effect on inflammation, such as the high levels of its healthy fats and its high levels of dietary fiber, and then lower levels of saturated fat, these all sculpt the microbiome to be plentiful, and we then don't have leaky gut. So this then breaks the cycle. Research also shows us that certain foods can trigger a specific reaction in the gut of some people. And in those cases, specific diets, such as a low FODMAP diet for irritable bowel syndrome, or avoiding some acidic foods for any of the GERD or acid reflux, those can be helpful for managing symptoms. Now, every person's situation is unique, and I often find a combination of integrative approaches can be helpful for reducing GI symptoms and reestablishing both a healthy gut and a healthy mind. It's also important to remember that for someone going through trauma, eating regular meals can definitely fall by the wayside. And when this happens, it can stress your body out even more by altering our stress hormones and slowing digestion.
I can't even tell you how many times I've had someone in my office that's really stressed out, and I just get this thought, it's like 2 p.m. appointment, and I'll just say, have you eaten anything? Have you had anything to drink today? And then oftentimes it's like this sort of, did I, like, tracking, I think I had, no, wait, I didn't eat anything. Or maybe, oh, I had coffee in the morning and that's it. And I have actually a few times said, okay, I had a client who loved the sandwich shop downstairs. Okay, go downstairs, grab a sandwich and come back up here. And like, you can eat it in the office, it's fine. But like, we're going to stay spinning in this really stressful state because, you're not intentionally doing intermittent fasting or something. You just forgot to feed your body. And it's in a stressful state. And then we'll have a sandwich and things all of a sudden feel a little better. And we can deal with what's the real problem, not what's the hunger.
Well, Lisa, I mean, that's a great point because I don't think a lot of us look at food as energy or a necessity to life. And something as simple as the thought of, well, we can't really drive our car if we don't have gasoline in it, right? We're not going to get too far. Well, the literal definition of calories is energy. So any place but here in the US, if you pick up a packaged food item and on the nutrition facts label, it will say energy, where here it says calories. And so when your body has been completely depleted of all of its energy, calories, then of course you're going to have someone come into your office and just kind of have a blank stare because they don't have the energy to communicate or function optimally.
Mhm.
And I think in those cases, kind of what we're talking about here, instead of food being like a stressful event, like, oh, I have to eat, one of the things I usually recommend to people is always carry some kind of snack around with you, whether if it's a little bag of nuts or some dried fruit or an energy bar. Some of those things we just need in an emergency situation because life happens and we don't really know where the day is going to take us. And so I think one of the keys here is just take the stress out of food and turn it into an enjoyable stress-free event by not getting to that hunger point.
Yeah.
So kind of looked at the big picture there, but let's hone in on a couple of the more specific foods that have a little bit more relevance to brain health than others. And I'm not going to really talk about superfoods here, like the trendy term floating around in the media, but more or less some key players. Because when it comes to feeding our brain, there are so many options and combinations of food to enjoy. And well, I say combinations because as we just learned about the body, everything is connected, and food is the same way. Certain foods have a synergistic effect and can enhance or hinder the bioavailability of certain nutrients. Bioavailability is just, the availability that our body can utilize the nutrients in a certain plant. And just like no two bodies are exactly alike, studies suggest that there is no one-size-fits-all diet for a healthy brain. And actually, I was reading the other day, this new study that came out probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, found that while some foods, like the ones that we're going to talk about today, were generally better for health than others, but different people had widely different metabolic responses to the same foods. And that was all due to their gut microbiome. All these little critters that are helping us digest our food react differently, just like we do on the outside. So, like Lisa has here on the screen, our number one on the list is plants. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, ginger, turmeric, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, fresh, frozen, organic, not organic, homegrown, store-bought. It doesn't really matter. There's some things that we can talk about later, but plants, eat them, color your plate like a rainbow, have fun with it. And there are so many listed here to choose from, and they all play a vital role in our health. They're loaded with fiber to keep our gut microbiome vibrant, and they're bursting with phytonutrients that help control inflammation and boost our immune system. Phytonutrients is basically a fancy word for plant nutrients and the immune system of the plant that protects it from harm. Now, we also know that phytonutrients, the mainstream term is antioxidants. So you might hear some of those interchanged. But plants are also a great source of magnesium, which helps to relax our muscles. So what's the brain? It's a very powerful muscle. What happens when you're stressed? We get all tight and tense. So do you see the connection with the magnesium? And also listed under plants, you may have noticed turmeric and ginger. Well, include these anti-inflammatory spices, which help to bring down inflammation, which is a response by the body when it is experiencing and dealing with trauma. And going back to combining foods, so turmeric is a perfect example. The phytonutrients in turmeric are better absorbed when consumed with black pepper. And Lisa, I know you were over a little while ago for tea on the patio, and we made golden milk or turmeric milk. And one of the things that I always put in there are black peppercorns so that they can seep out some of their phytonutrients and they bind with the phytonutrients in turmeric so that our bodies can absorb it more readily. All right, next on our list, we have fungus, which is not something you usually think of when we talk about food, but these little guys sure do pack a punch with their immune boosting superpowers. And then we'll get into some fermented foods. And the general consensus these days holds that consuming fermented foods have benefits to gut health. And these foods are full of healthy probiotic bacteria, such as yogurt, kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi. And many of you have also heard of the term prebiotic. It's not so mainstream, but this refers to the foods that the probiotics feed off of to stay strong and plentiful. And some of the most common prebiotic-rich foods are garlic, onions, Jerusalem artichokes, otherwise known as sunchokes, asparagus, bananas, barley, oats, and apples. And as you can see, this brings us back up to plants. So again, everything is very connected. We also have omega-3s here. And this has been a hot topic for some time now. Oily fish like salmon and sardines are abundant in the omega-3 fatty acids active form, but you can also get omega-3s in chia seeds, some nuts, green leafy vegetables, and ground flaxseed. And I say ground flaxseed here as a little pro tip because of the fibrous shell in the flaxseed. When you eat it, your body can't digest it to get to where the omega-3s are in the center of that seed. And so if you grind it, then you can access those omega-3s quite readily. And if you buy ground flaxseed, make sure that you keep it in the freezer so that that healthy oil doesn't go bad. So these fatty acids, the omega-3s, are one of the basic building blocks of nerve cell membranes. They're essential for healthy nervous system function, and they help combat inflammation. Something not really on this list here, but I also wanted to mention B vitamins, which help provide energy to our cells, including brain cells. And one specific B vitamin I really want to point out is folate. The active form of this is methylfolate, which helps to break down the amino acid homocysteine, where we've seen high levels of this associated with depression, as well as dementia, heart disease, and stroke. And so where do we get these B vitamins? Well, we can get them from our plants, but also if you eat meat, you can get the B vitamins from meat as well. Now, I also get a lot of questions about caffeine. And as a general rule, I recommend avoiding caffeine through recovery. But now let's take a look at a few examples of some of the foods that we can enjoy. And Lisa, if you want to jump to the next slide. All right, so you know it's also lunchtime because this picture makes me really, really hungry. So one of the things here, I just want to take you through a little bit of the day. So we can kickstart our day with some creamy, plain, full fat, yes, I said full fat, Greek yogurt, some fresh organic berries, and nuts. Greek yogurt is higher in protein than other store-bought yogurts, and it's also loaded with those probiotic critters. The walnuts are a great source of the plant-based omega-3s, which again is linked to decreasing inflammation. The berries are full of flavonoids that are linked to brain health, and some research even shows that it can help improve memory. Not to mention berries are an excellent source of fiber. We also
this is what my dad was feeding my grandma. You know, she just passed at almost 105 years of age, and I think since her 90s he started making her smoothies that had walnuts and berries and yogurt all blended up. I mean, at first she would eat it, and then over time she started blending it and just having it more as a drink. But man, he was just putting he knew a lot of what you're saying, the omega-3s and the, you know, blueberries. My dad's a big fan of blueberries, so he was putting all that together for her and just keeping her going, which I think is great. Better than the little like shakes they were giving her, you know, in her meals. It's like, no.
Oh, I can't even talk about some of those pre-shake things, even though there's a time and a place for everything. But I mean, to that point though, I mean, if she enjoyed that, right, then she's going to be able to absorb all of the nutrients in it. So if you don't like yogurt, if you don't like walnuts, if you don't like berries, find a combination that works for you. Because if you're saying, well, Sarah and Lisa said I should have this, then as soon as you put that food into your body, it's foreign to your body. It's saying, wait, I didn't want this. Why are you feeding it to me? And again, that brain connection. So you're not going to absorb all of the nutrients in these healthy foods. Kind of like, you know, some kids don't like Brussels sprouts, and you go to feed it to them and they just want to spit it out. It is that reaction, but your body still has that reaction to the foods that you don't enjoy, and then you're not going to get the benefits from it. So it's great to hear that she did enjoy it enough to be like, well, I'm still going to have this, but I'm just going to put it in a smoothie form. Great. Exactly. You still get all the nutrients for it.
And I just want to say, also speaking to a whole other thing maybe we can do another webinar on at some point, about intuitive eating, right? Just actually respecting our body signals is super important in terms of mindfulness and food.
No, and that, I mean, that's a whole topic, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But I will talk about kimchi and fermented foods.
Talk about some kimchi.
So we did learn that kimchi is a fermented food, but that's not its only superpower. So kimchi is also made from cabbage, which is a green leafy cruciferous vegetable. And what do vegetables have? They have fiber. And also the cabbage, which is a cruciferous vegetable, also has research for so many other health benefits, including cancer prevention. So, I mean, I can't talk enough about kimchi. And then it's winter. It's cold outside. Lisa, it was 27 degrees at my house this morning at 5 o'clock when I went outside. I was like, I mean, okay, I'll take it. It is winter. But now I want soup. So what I do for soup, I call it everything and the kitchen sink vegetable miso soup, where I go into the refrigerator, gather all of the random leftover veggies, toss them in a pot with some miso broth and some non-GMO organic tofu, and voila, dinner is served. So miso is made by fermenting soybeans, and it's not only good for your microbiome health, but it's been associated with decreasing your risk for breast cancer. And then add some mushrooms to this soup for their vitamin D, and talk about a brain boosting delicious meal. So you're coming over for lunch, right, Lisa?
I'm so hungry. I know. Why can't I come over?
And then we have this beautiful salmon niçoise salad. And yes, you can do this vegetarian style. And here we are hitting all of those major brain boosting food groups. So we have the healthy fats from the salmon and olives, and even the avocado if you choose to add this delicious fruit to your salad. We have fiber from the variety of vegetables, phytonutrients from this beautiful rainbow displayed here. And then hopefully you're also taking your time to enjoy this meal bite by bite, because one of the most important messages about food is eating mindfully. Mm-hmm. So food itself, like we mentioned earlier, it can be a stressor for many people. And finding time to eat can be stressful, especially in today's world where we're always on the go. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about, stress can alter digestion and make us feel nauseous. So when this happens, eating is the last thing someone might want to do. So let's bring food back to a neutral space, and mindful eating techniques can also play a huge role here. And I want to briefly skim over the next slide, Lisa, where we're talking about supplements here. So in my practice, I do believe that supplements should be used as just that. They should supplement a balanced diet or specific nutrients that are lacking in your current diet. So let's talk a little bit about some of these examples that we have here. We chatted earlier that there are hundreds of different species of these probiotic critters in your gut. The foods we eat don't necessarily contain all the ones that we need in our gut. And research has shown that probiotic supplementation can improve sleep, bowel habits, and reduce stress and cortisol levels, all which play a role in balanced recovery here. So then we'll look a little bit at omega-3s, and many people are vegetarian or vegan. Well, the plant form of omega-3s are less bioavailability that we skimmed over earlier than the active form that's found in fish. And not to mention that the typical Western diet has an imbalanced ratio of 1 to 25 omega-3 to omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory. And if we look 25 years ago, we were eating at a 1 to 4, maybe a 1 to 6 ratio. So before you supplement with omegas, it's really important to understand where you are in your food journey and then adjust the supplement as needed. Same with vitamin D. I mean, we talked a bit about mushrooms, which are a great source of vitamin D, but for someone with darker skin, somebody who wears sunscreen, somebody who doesn't spend the majority of their time outside, hence we're all on this webinar, I'm assuming most of us are inside, supplementation might be recommended. But why is vitamin D even important? Well, the brain has receptors for vitamin D in the areas involved in stress, trauma, and depression. Vitamin D is also involved in the healthy production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So make sure next time you go for your annual checkup and you go to the lab, have your doctor add a vitamin D level test, and then you can adjust supplementation as needed. Oh my gosh, Lisa, wow. We went through a lot today. And can you believe that this was just the tip of the iceberg? Oh my gosh. So even though we talked about so many components to nourishing your trauma recovery, there is one message that I would like for you to take away today. We need to pay attention to what we eat, how we eat it, and why we eat what we eat. And learning to eat and live mindfully is the key to optimizing health and fostering inner peace. And I hope that you leave here today empowered with ways to help you and those around you move healthfully forward. So if you're eager for more resources, I encourage you to find an integrative and functional medicine practitioner, and the Dietitians in Integrative and Functional Medicine and the Institute for Functional Medicine are great websites to help you locate one. They also have additional trainings if you're looking to expand your practice that you can access as well. I also want to take a minute to focus on you, because I do believe that you are the best antidote to the damaging effects of stress and trauma. And you have the power to choose what nourishing foods work best for you. So start slow, be mindful, and create your own plate rainbow. Lisa, thank you again. This has been so much fun. I guess I'll just turn the virtual stage back over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. You are just a wealth of information. And I don't know if I mentioned, I said we met in California, but we met running. So every time we're on a run, I mean, I feel like something just comes up, and some study you read, or some will run past some fruit, and I learn so much every time, and I'm learning from you now. So thank you so much for sharing this with everyone here. I want to wrap up with a few suggestions for yoga practices. Sarah talked about the importance of mindfulness while we're eating. There are also things we can do while we're not eating to support digestion. So just a few basics. Again, the parasympathetic system functions in a lot of different ways. One of those, you might have heard of the term rest and digest, just resting. I've read a statistic that through the pandemic, people are working like 20% more hours than normal because there's nothing else to do. Just lying down on your couch or reading a book, or it's really personal what feels like rest to you, and that might change throughout your life. But I notice when I simply lie down, my abdomen will start sort of churning, and people sometimes get embarrassed in yoga class and shavasana at the end. Oh, my stomach's making all this noise. It's like, I celebrate that. As a teacher, I hear a little gurgle here, go over there, and I'm like, yes, wonderful, hallelujah. I mean, quietly, because everyone's in shavasana, I think it to myself. But just letting yourself rest. And this means mental rest too. And this has been a big lesson for me, that it's like, don't lie down and like, okay, now I have to meditate, or lie down and do something, or plan. Like, just lie down and whatever you can do that just feels like a break. Now, in yoga in particular, we'll focus on lying on our left side, right? The large intestine ascends on the right. It's transverse. It goes across the body in the middle, and then it goes down on the left side. So if you're lying on your left, you're sort of helping gravity bring things across and down. Now, are you going to feel some big impact? Probably not. But it's a way to go with what we know about the asymmetry in our biology rather than go against it, right? So if you were lying on your right side, then the smooth muscle in your digestive tract would be going against gravity. So rest, lying down on your left side, particularly after a meal, or just in general. Also, gentle back bends. Like, I really love supported bridge pose on a block, or as this person in the photo is doing it on a bolster. It can be really gentle, relatively simple. Many of you are familiar with this shape, but it's just elevating your hips on a pillow, a block, a yoga bolster. And what I often feel is this gentle stretch, this kind of tonifying stretch in my abdomen. And it helps me actually connect more with what's going on there. Like, oh, maybe it feels a little tense in this area, or my stomach feels a little sour, or whatever else. And I might not have been aware of that before I lie down and do this. So a very gentle back bend, not something super athletic and stimulating, can help you connect with and sort of make some energy, make some space for energy to go to your abdomen. So you're mentally more connected there, and there's that little stretch and space. You know, you can also say that then the chi or the prana or the energy pools there in some of the shapes that we practice. So with that, anything that's a gentle belly massage, any prone yoga postures, like some of you are familiar with Shalabhasana or Dhanurasana, that would be, you know, they call it like locust pose, but it's like the superhero, right? You lift your arms and your legs while you're on the floor and your stomach's pressing into the yoga mat or a blanket if it's sensitive. Bow pose where you grab your ankles. There's this gentle pressure of your abdomen on the floor, and that can be like a little massage. In Zen Shiatsu, we'll call the center the hara, and there's a whole map of which different areas correlate to different systems, similar to Chinese medicine, but different. So you can just build awareness of what's happening in there. Gentle massage. I remember my shiatsu therapist in Cambridge used to say, just assessing and touching your abdomen starts to treat it, right? So she'd be like, oh, lung is a little off or kidney feels. And then just by sort of poking around and feeling on my abdomen, she would be like, oh, it's already changing, right? So that gentle massage, even without really specific knowledge, that sort of intuitive support can also help. So those are your free yoga, your few yoga postures that you can do anytime, anywhere. And definitely if you have questions about those, you can reach out to me or your yoga people and get some more clarity. We did cover a lot, Sarah, and we'll have time for a couple questions here. We covered a basic framework for understanding the impact of trauma. We talked about how trauma and the gut are interconnected and how food and mindfulness can support your healing and recovery. So much. So next, we'll be sending out the recording via email. I also, many of you in here have already done it. I have an 8-week online training program. The next one begins March 15th. So this is in yoga for trauma specifically. So if you're interested in that, you can find more information and apply at howwecanheal.com/Y4T. All right, and I did say I was going to give away my book, so I'm going to give away one of these. So this is my first book, Embodied Healing, my second, How You Can Heal, and my most recent is Yoga for Trauma Recovery, Theory, Philosophy, and Practice. So what I'm going to do is have you go down into the Q&A box, whether it's at the bottom of your screen at the top, and if you would like a copy of the book, put your name. Let's see, I don't need your email. Just put your name, and we're gonna take a little mindful moment and a breath, and Sarah's gonna pick a number, and then we're gonna award someone the book. So I'll give you a second to do that. I'll also say, well, I'll wait. Suspense, drum roll, please.
Lisa, what number am I picking? Do I have a range?
I don't know, pick a number between like 1 and 50. The lower, easier it'll be to count.
I'm like 44, all the fours. Okay, let's do 24.
24, okay. So I'm just gonna scroll. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, suspense. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2. You said 24, right?
24.
Teresia. Oh, you have a last name like mine that no one can pronounce. I just want to give you some love for that. Krajkovikova? I hope I didn't butcher it too much, but I'm with you in empathy if I did. That it happens to me too. So Teresia, if you could send your full shipping address. Not everyone can see the questions, don't worry, so we'll keep it confidential, but send your whole shipping address and I will sign this book, put a little love on it and ship it out to you ASAP. So I'll look for that later. And then everyone else, if you put your name in, I'll make you go back and do it again. But if you want to put your email in, then I will send you, including you, Therese, a copy of How We Can Heal, my second book. So where'd it go? The yellow one in the middle. All right. So everybody's a winner. It's my Oprah moment. You get a book. You get a book. All right. So if you want a copy of How You Can Heal, put your email in and I will send you a copy of that. All right. So what do we have? A few minutes. We wanted, Sarah, do you have to go right away? I know you've got a busy.
No, I'm okay for a little while after.
Okay, so we might run a little bit over just to answer a few questions. One thing I want to say, I always wrap by just reminding you all to take care of each other, especially during these crazy years and times that we're having. So I have a little photo here. This is Sarah and I pre-pandemic, obviously, snuggling up at the farmer's market. It's always good to connect. So even if you have to do a distance visit, I know farmers markets are still open, which is great. Sometimes we'll go out on the trail and stay far away from each other. I've also during the pandemic just snuggled up with my dog, as you guys know. So keep that focus on care. We've talked about that in other webinars, why that's important. All right, so we've got the resources here and I will send a PDF of the slides so you can see everything, and that concludes our presentation. So I have time, we have a little bit of time now for questions. So I want to thank you all for joining. If you have to go, I know it's almost the hour. If you have to go, we will send you the recording with the questions in it so you can listen to that as well. Love, love, love you long time. I know we have a ton of questions already in here, so I'm just going to stop the share so you can see our faces. Big faces. There we go. All right. Thank you, Sarah. That was so good. All right, so I will field questions.
Lisa, I know that we had a couple questions emailed at the start of this. Do we want to start there?
So the first one was, when I experience emotional relationship stress, I lose weight. Even though I eat, I have a hard time keeping the weight on. Do you have any suggestions on foods that I can eat to help me gain a few pounds and not lose muscle? It seems like I eat the same stuff, chicken, eggs, pasta sandwiches, smoothies, nuts, and I'd like some ideas for other substantial foods. I have a high metabolism and I get hungry every couple of hours, low blood sugar too. So what would
that's a great question. And I wish I can draw, so I'm going to use my finger and air draw here for a few examples, just to set the stage to answer this. So when we eat something that is a very simple carbohydrate, we'll bring the Cheeto example back here.
Flaming hot. That's what the kids are. Flaming hot Cheeto.
So if you think of a very high bell curve, kind of a spiked one, giving a kid a candy bar, right? They have all this energy, their energy goes up and then instantly they crash and it's nap time. So that is an example of when we're eating a very simple carbohydrate. Goes right through our body. When we have a carbohydrate, let's say with a protein, that starts to even out the curve. And then even so with a fat, right? And so that is even a lower curve. So we have 1, 2, 3 curves, okay? And the reason I bring that up is because when you have a high metabolism and foods are burning through, remember, calories as energy, and not every calorie is created equal. Fats take the longest to move through your digestive system. Yeah. Proteins are right after that, and then carbohydrates, again, just a quick one. I guess there's also a fourth curve I should mention, and that's when we're eating a very complex carbohydrate, like a whole grain loaded with fiber. It's a little bit less of a spike.
Yeah.
So if we are stressed and we're burning through calories, because again, I mean, Lisa, you talked about this at the beginning, right? When you're in the red phase, I mean, you're ready to go. Your body needs instant energy. So it's releasing all this energy in case your body decides that it needs to take flight. Right. And when you're in this chronic stress state and your body is activating this fight or flight system, then you're going to always burn those energies. So what do? I really do recommend starting to eat something of a combination type food. So having that carbohydrate, but having either a protein or a fat with it. So it's not just eating an apple. It would be, let's eat an apple and dip it in some almond butter, right? Or a handful of nuts. Or let's have an avocado toast. So we get all of those healthy fats and the fiber and from the avocado, and then on a whole grain toast. So you get that carbohydrate. So you can fuel your body with some energy, but it's also not this instant release. And so it is common during high stress for some people. Remember the study that I mentioned earlier that came out at the beginning of this year? We are all going to react different, and in huge part to our microbiome as well. I would also recommend mindful style eating and eating slower if you have the time during your smaller, more frequent meals, snacks.
Yeah. So another question along these lines about plant-based protein powders and on-the-go drinks and shakes. What are your thoughts on those?
I'm a whole food kind of person, but I understand that there is a time and a place for everything. And convenience is huge. So kind of going back to basic nutrition, and Michael Pollan really hit it with some of the quotes that he has. So if it's made, or if it comes from a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't. Or eat it if your grandma ate it. So when I look at a nutrition facts label, I want to know the ingredients. I want to know the ingredients that's in there. There's a couple on-the-go smoothies out there. Oh, what's a new one that somebody just sent me some samples of? Hold on, I think it's called Nula, N-U-L-A.
These that aren't like excessively sweetened.
Yeah, and it's not ultra processed. And when I look at the ingredients that are in these little on-the-go smoothies, it's banana, pea protein, berries if you get a berry flavor, right? So it'll tell you what the specific food is. They're not made from concentrate. It is just the food itself, like if you were at home pureeing something. So I do go with those. I do also want to talk again about the combination of foods. So you may have heard of complementary proteins. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word there. And complementary proteins are basically, all plants don't have the same building blocks of a protein that a meat would. They might be low in one of the amino acids. And so when you eat a combination of these foods like rice and beans, you have the rice that's low in one of the amino acids, but the beans are higher in it. And so that gives your body the building blocks to form a complete protein. And so being mindful that if you are looking at plant-based proteins, what do you need to eat with that as its balance?
Yeah, that's great. And there's another question here, because you didn't mention beans earlier, but you're mentioning them now. How do beans affect the brain-gut connection? Also, where do sea vegetables, kelp, dulse, etc. fit in?
So beans, again, totally loaded with fiber. They also have some phytonutrients, and there are a few studies right now showing direct relationship to the phytonutrients and brain function, but most of the focus with beans are the fiber content of it. And so obviously with fiber, we're feeding the bacteria in our gut, which then we go back to the cycle, which leads to a healthy microbiome, decreases leaky gut and back. But I do want to mention that a lot of people, I mean, what's the saying? Beans, beans, magical fruit, right? So some people have a hard time digesting beans. Now, one of the ways around this, if you buy dried beans, soaking them helps. I mean, you're supposed to soak them, but maybe soaking them a little longer. And then when you boil them, you will see this cloud form in the water. And you're taking some of that shell off and breaking down some of the initial fibers that are harder for a digestive system to break down. So that's one trick. If you are eating canned beans, take the beans, put them in a strainer, and kind of run them underwater to get that coating off again here for about a minute. If they have salt in them, you're also going to decrease the salt content in them, which is good because they tend to oversalt canned produce anyway. But that can help aid in the digestion too. And Lisa, then I think you also mentioned sea vegetables. So with sea vegetables, again, we have the fiber content in them, and there are some links to specific growth of certain bacterias linked to brain health with our sea vegetables.
Yeah, nice. Someone else has a question. How long does it take to typically recover the gut after releasing excessive stress?
So, Lisa, I'm not going to answer that question because everybody's body is very different.
I would say this sounds like it depends.
Yeah. But I will say that it is time. It's not just like popping a pill when you have a headache and boom, okay, the headache's gone in 20 minutes. It does take a lot of work to rebuild, re-inoculate, and then recover the gut so that you can have that healthy brain-gut connection.
Okay, another question. Oh, I just lost it. What if you've had multiple surgeries in the gut area? Can you discuss how to recover nerve damage, scar tissue? I don't know if that's something you can speak to.
Yeah, and I'd love to learn more about like what specific surgeries, because they're all very different. Again, this is kind of a it depends scenario. But yes, surgeries do aid or do inhibit a lot of our absorption of nutrients depending on where they are, because every different part of the digestive system is associated with a specific nutrient that they're either breaking down or absorbing. And so it really just depends on where the surgery is.
Someone else has developed some food allergies in adulthood, comes out as throat sensitivity and itchiness, things like apple, cantaloupe, even avocado, peaches. Any thoughts about what's causing this and how to combat it to be able to enjoy those foods again?
I can definitely empathize with the avocado allergy.
Oh, sorry.
Lisa does like to tease me when we go to eat, when you can go to eat, because I cannot eat avocado these days. Very similar. So there's a lot of different theories, and of course there needs to be some more information before I can fully answer this question. But avocado, for example, is a nightshade vegetable, and those tend to be hot topics for people with different food sensitivities. And so eggplant, bell peppers, all kind of also fall into that category. So it's seeing if that's one of the sensitivities in a specific food group that somebody has. But also as we age and our microbiome changes, then we can also see different sensitivities as well to certain foods. And so it's a natural aging process, but again, helping to re-inoculate our gut to help it heal, and then to rebuild that connection can also decrease some food sensitivities. But if you do have food sensitivities, it's also being mindful not to consume those foods, because what happens?
Inflammation.
Dysbiosis, leaky gut.
Yeah. I think you might have addressed this already. Can you talk about the importance of complete protein in brain health?
Well, okay, so complete proteins, I'll just say again, so if we look at the building blocks of what a protein is made out of, they're called amino acids. And when we look at plant proteins, a lot of the different plants aren't complete with the amino acid structure. And so I'll use the rice and beans example again, because the rice might have a deficiency in some of the amino acids, and the beans would be abundance in the one that the rice is limited in. So when you eat them together, or even actually some research shows within about a 24-hour period, your body can then take amino acids from here, take amino acids from here, puzzle piece together, and now you have a complete protein. And so that's what it's referenced for a complete protein. But Lisa, I also, I want to say that, you know, vegan and vegetarian are more popular as time goes on. And there are so many more companies now out there with plant-based protein foods, like different chicken or meat that are made from plant, even some seafoods now that we see. And it's a very fascinating field. Stanford just came out with a review study on that, not necessarily linked to brain health, but the protein structure itself and how our body reacts to it and just overall health. And that came out, I want to say possibly in June. And so it's very exciting to see more and more companies jump on that bandwagon. I know I mentioned at the beginning of our talk about, the foods that we eat can heal the mind, body, and the environment. And the more plants that we consume and the less meat products, we can definitely change what's going on with climate change.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother topic, but we won't go down that rabbit hole.
So I think maybe time for one more question. We've got a lot of questions that I think we won't get to. So maybe we'll have to do we'll have to go down other rabbit holes in the future, the whole intuitive eating, the environmental impact. And there's also just some questions that I think are pretty specific to different conditions. So I don't know if we can speak to that, but another one that came in was from my own experience, having recent trauma and reoccurring trauma with fires here in California. I'd love to learn or have resources about how to eat healthy and have all these nutritional needs covered with minimal time required for cooking and prep. Willing to eat simple, and I often choose to eat things that are cold or room temperature because I avoid microwaves and don't have time to heat.
So I don't have a microwave either, which is very interesting. And I know with everyone's busy lifestyle, we think of healthy foods as something that we have to spend the entire day in the kitchen preparing. And to this specific question, I do want to say some of those resources I shared earlier. So working with a dietitian who is focusing on integrative and functional medicine, or finding there is a culinary dietitian as well available, and you can Google that to find some in your area. But lots of resources out there. Eating healthy means something very different to everybody, and your needs are all very different as well. So something as simple as the yogurt with the nuts and the fresh fruit, right? Very simple. Sprinkle everything on and eat. And so thinking some of those style of meals, which is a very balanced meal in itself. So taking the complexity out of the prep.
I'm thinking kimchi too, what you were talking about, how I feel like in the Bay Area especially, there's like a lot of little local kimchi. They're on Good Eggs and stuff like that. You can order some pretty good stuff.
There's also vegan ones, Lisa. Like on Good Eggs, I've seen like they'll mark them as vegan. So a lot of the producers out there are now doing that.
So I think we'll have to pause there. Do you have any resources? A couple times IBS came up in the questions. Someone else asked about OCD and diet. I feel like we might get down pretty far rabbit holes, but do you have any quick resources for folks about OCD or IBS?
Yeah, again, I would reference somebody to work with an integrative and functional medicine practitioner. Again, I can give blanket recommendations, but it doesn't really get to the core that somebody's trying to work on.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. And I love how many of you write so many nice comments in here, like so many thank yous. Thank you, you're welcome. Right? You guys are all over the world, in Canada and the UK. Isn't it kind of late there? I guess we're all,
oh my goodness.
I guess we're all off our
I may have just found the Q&A button, but we won't talk about
that. You're fine. I'm DJing. You're welcome to each of you, saying thank you to each of you for being here. Thank you for being here and having an interest in trauma recovery and healing and all of those things in general. Someone asked if there's a February Y4T training, and there is, but it's limited. We're just doing it because the January one sold out. So we have a really small group starting in February. So if you are, I don't know, jonesing to get in before March, you can apply for that. We've already sent out invitations, so it's going to fill up quickly. But if you're interested in starting, what is it, February 1st, next Monday, you can put in an application today and we'll get back to you ASAP. All right, you're welcome, everybody. You're welcome, Susie, Terry, Janet, Robin, Stacy. I love it. I love it. Yay, it's like we're together. Thank you, Sarah, again, just for sharing your knowledge with us.
Oh, you guys, thank you. This is such an honorable experience. I love meeting all of you virtually. And Lisa, I miss you. Hugs from afar.
Hugs. Yes, we'll have to go get out on a trail soon. Go look for some snow. Some snow in the Bay Area. It's that cold. I swear, it really gets cold here. People who are in like the north of Canada or out there, just like, it's not cold. Stop.
I know.
All right, we will send out the recording so you can go back over any Q&A and any of the information you want. And you're welcome to share this resource as well with your friends. Thanks, everyone. Have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day and evening or whatever it is. And we're sending you lots of love.